Hello and welcome to today's CDCT live session. I'm your host, Jason Rader from Insight's Cloud and Data Center Transformation Division. Our topic today is on virtual CISOs, and with me today is Evan Rowell, who's a regional security principal in CDCT with me. Good morning and welcome, Evan.
Good morning, and thanks for letting me join.
Glad to have you, man. So, I think the virtual CISO concept is, a lot of folks are pretty familiar with it, but for the uninitiated, let's define what a virtual Chief Information Security Officer is.
So typically, a virtual Chief Information Security Officer is an individual who comes in and helps devise a strategy, planning, helps with tactical type needs within an organization. So it's really appropriate for companies that don't feel like they have a handle on security throughout the organization. It's appropriate for companies that do have a Chief Information Security Officer on staff, but perhaps don't feel like they have expertise in a specific area. So it kind of runs the gamut. So we see it a lot more with mid to small type businesses, but it's really not defined as this company or that company. It really varies from company to company, depending on what their specialty is or what their need is.
Yeah, so it sounds like, the way that you just described it, they can do all of these things. So are we talking about organizations that have never had one before? What if they've had one or they currently have one that has been there? I think you talked about, maybe an expertise that they need. How do those guys kind of work together?
Yeah, so what we see a lot, and I think this is probably pretty typical in the industry, there's the types of information, the types of things that are needed to run an organization from a security perspective, is pretty vast. So a lot of companies just don't have that expertise. A lot of individuals who act as CISOs within an organization, it's hard for them to really get ramped up and up to speed on all the various aspects of what is required. And these are individuals with a lot of years of experience. It's hard for us as security professionals, and we do this day in and day out, to keep up with everything that should be handled across an organization. So we see a need really from companies from that perspective. So they need help in a specific area. We see the help being asked for from companies that don't have anyone there. So they really have no experience in this area. A CIO is trying to run security across the organization, a VP of IT, that sort of individual. So there's just so much to take into account. There's so much information. There's so much that changes on a daily basis. And I know that many who are listening to this webinar can probably understand that, but there's so much that happens from that perspective. It's just almost impossible to keep up with everything. So from that perspective, we get a lot of customers asking for help based on that. So they need specialty in email security. They need help with identity and access management. They need help with vulnerability management. They need help with developing a security operations center. So there's just a whole array of areas that we can, that we see to ask from customers. So,
no, that's great. I played the guy that asked the questions sometimes. Obviously, you and I both have been doing this stuff for a long time, and I think as we talk to folks, especially folks that are my age. Nobody went to school to be a Chief Information Security Officer, right? It's one of those things where you're a business leader, you maybe have your MBA or those kinds of things, but the security aspect is something that you got kind of on the job or have just kind of reacted potentially to some of the stuff that's coming up. But some of these things are pretty heavy hitting, like CCPA or GDPR recently, and to your point, I think it's great to be able to engage somebody that doesn't take over your position for you, but adds that area of expertise, which they're all over. We live and eat and breathe this stuff every day. So it gives them the ability to have a confidant that they can talk and ask the questions they maybe don't feel comfortable asking. And then, we get to, leverage this knowledge that we've had to go out and read all of the documentation and the guidance related to it. Talk to general counsel, those kinds of things. We get to leverage that over and over, working with different folks that we work with, where they, all of that effort that they would have to do to be able to basically put a framework in place or decide on the appropriate controls that deal with the level of risk that they're exposed to. I kind of look at a virtual CISO as somebody who kind of, augments, like a build and transfer, if you will, kind of gets some stuff kind of instantiated, and then you operate it, as an organization, and then you go back to those guys for checkups and those kinds of things.
That's right, and I think that's where this type of offering plays well. I think that the value of a virtual CISO isn't coming in and basically developing everything from scratch and coming up with all of the solutions and and doing everything for organization. Where it works well is if you have some sort of framework in place or you have some sort of idea of where you want security to go within the organization. You have business objectives and you have business goals. And so based on that, the virtual CISO is able to align with that. So the first thing a virtual CISO will want to do when they come into an organization is understand what is the business trying to do? Where does the business want to go? What are the objectives? And then based on that, who are the key stakeholders? Who's present within the organization who can make these significant decisions throughout the business? And then after that, having an understanding of what investments the organization has made. So what investments do we have currently in place? Let's take advantage of those. Where there are gaps or where those aren't working well, let's figure out how to make that work better. And so those are the key areas that a virtual CISO typically is able to add value in. So it's not coming in and spending all of their time and really trying to drive everything across the business. It's really to support the business.
Yeah, I think that's a couple of good points I want to kind of bring out there is the fact that a virtual CISO doesn't come in and immediately start telling you what to do, right? There's a lot of fact finding that's got to go down. This isn't like some checklist that they're rolling through. They've got to really do the due diligence. And of course, there's that hopeful partnership between the organization trying to figure out what's going on and then being able to drive those particular things. And I think, sometimes we end up working with an organization where they're doing a giant transformation organizationally. Maybe they've been acquired, who knows? But there's some stuff that, sometimes it's helpful to have that external entity to kind of come in and maybe even be the bad guy. Hey, we've got to reorg, we got to do some stuff, we got to change things a little bit. And we're willing to take that hit because we understand that investment that needs to be made because ultimately things are going to be better on the back end of things.
Right, and some of the areas that we see customers having issues with, sometimes there's an unbalance in what a CISO maybe has experience in, and that's kind of a big deal, right? So they may have a very good background in strategic initiatives and governance, risk and compliance, but may not have a good background in the specific solution set technologies that are available. And so virtual CISO can come in and help augment that from that perspective. And it could be vice versa. It could be an individual who's come up through the ranks. They have a good feel for technologies, but they don't have a very strong background in governance. And both of those are required and they need to be balanced. And ultimately, that's what's going to help drive the message to executive leadership, to the board members. If you can balance that message of this is our direction, this is our goal, and here are the types of solutions we can lean on and leverage to get there.
No, I think that's perfect because, like you said, different backgrounds for different CISOs. There's no standard checklist job description for a chief information security officer. So they're all not created the same. I talk just because this title, like you have a CEO of a transportation company and a CEO of a financial institution, they're not doing the same thing. So if the CEO in those, but it's relatively close, but a CISO in those different organizations could potentially be focusing on completely different things. And it also depends on, one of the things we have to figure out right when we go in is where does the chief information security officer report within the organization? Because that'll tell you a lot about how we've got to, the things that we can leverage within that organization to get things done.
Right, and it's very difficult. Very difficult, and we've seen this for years. This is nothing new, but CISOs that typically report up through the IT infrastructure have a difficult time getting things done. Those who report up through the compliance side of the house, they may have a difficult time getting done by getting buy-in from the IT side. Yeah. So try to figure out how to weave that and how to drive the message, and we're the bad guys, right? So we're the ones who are always trying to stop business and stifle business and keep things from growing. But that's not really what CISO should be doing. It's really something we're trying to change within the industry, and we want to make sure that those who are in IT, those who are running the business, those who are handling financial operations, understand that our goal is to, one, make things safer, but two, make things seamless. And so a lot of the solutions, a lot of the technologies that companies are developing are aimed at that goal, and that's our goal as well. Is try to make this as seamless as possible, as easy as possible, while also protecting the business. And it's difficult. And so I think that's one of the reasons this type of service, really works well for a lot of businesses, because we can help navigate. And we're in a position where we're able to see a lot of different types of industries, to your point, Jason. So we see manufacturing, we see healthcare, we see customers that accept credit cards on a daily basis, we see public sector, private sector. So it's really interesting to see the different dynamics, and they're pretty typical. Once you get into those specific industry sectors, you see the same thing, working its way out over and over again. But we're able to take what's good and the service that's typically offered. The individuals who are helping to consult in this capacity are able to take what's good from one industry to the next and map that over. So you get a different perspective is what I'm trying to get at. So.
No, I love it. When we go in and work with folks, I think one of the catalysts for this type of engagement for us with a lot of different types of clients is typically a changeover in maybe a CIO within the organization, where they want to come in and kind of have us augment their current CISO's efforts so that we can maybe help do the corral, again, being able to report all of those security initiatives. You said earlier, all of the things that have been committed to the business from a security perspective that are in flight, we've got to deal with that stuff. But then again, working that strategy, sometimes CISOs get very focused on those tactical things. They had an audit and they're trying to fill those gaps that they've got from a remediation perspective. You never get to that point to where the proactive things can be taken into consideration. And I think having somebody come in and be able to do that is a good thing. And again, we work a lot with when the CIO changes out. That typically is how we kind of assist with those things.
Well, and that's the danger. That's a big issue that we see time and time again. Is you're so defensive. You're working on just trying to keep up with the audits and the assessments and the vulnerabilities that manifest themselves, or someone has noticed something that needs to be fixed, or someone's read an article about this, and so you're so defensive that you get tunnel vision and you want to focus on this one area. And that can be detrimental to the overall goal and what you're trying to do, and it gets you into the mindset of, I just need this specific point solution. I need this specific technology because I heard it works really well. It's going to solve this one problem. We think that's probably the not the right way to approach it. Oftentimes, we think it's better to back up. Really, if you're not able to back up, and if you can't, as an organization, if you're kind of in the weeds and you just can't get into it and you can't think strategically, oftentimes it's better to have someone come in, evaluate what's going on, make suggestions, align properly with the business, align your solution set and what you're trying to do properly with the business. But, taking that very, focused, let's fix this problem, let's fix that problem. It's very difficult to operate in an extended way for most businesses. And so if we can back up and get out of that thinking, that's where we want to get to. And another thing is, it's often helpful, and this is one of the things we try to do. Let's back up and let's talk about first principles. Like, what are the main things from a security perspective you're trying to do? Just boil it down to the key things you're trying to do. Typically, it all comes back to identity. So understanding who's accessing what, who's getting into your environment, who's getting into your network. So control of access. And then visibility, having visibility, being able to maintain visibility across the organization. And we feel as a group, as an organization that helps other organizations, if you can get a handle on that, if you can get a handle on identity and visibility across your business, then everything else flows from that. So your data controls that you're trying to follow, your governance, risk, and compliance controls that you have to follow. So all of that will come from that. Get a handle on who's doing what and have visibility across that.
No, that's perfect. Good point of view for that perspective, I think. So do we have any kind of success stories that we would kind of like to talk about, give people kind of an example of how we kind of come in and operate?
Yeah, we do. So
we don't want
good example.
No names, please, but yeah, just some examples.
No names. Okay, so this actually highlights what we were speaking to earlier. So the whole idea of being either too strategic or too tactical. We worked with a customer. They had just recently hired a chief information security officer, a very bright individual, had a lot of experience in the public sector, within government and the public sector. was able to very clearly articulate the high level goals and what we should be focused on as an organization and how we should be directing the business and all of the things that we should be doing, but did not have a firm grasp of the tactical way of getting there. So spent all of his time developing the strategy and almost developing it in a silo such that he wasn't taking into account the stakeholders within the business, the investments that were made, almost dictating exactly what the business should be doing, and ultimately it led to to failure and led to him being let go. So we came in at that point, and we had worked with the company previously. We came in at that point and basically offered our services, the virtual CISO services, in a way that we could come in, we could get all of the stakeholders together. Let's refocus. The strategy's good. Where we're trying to go is good. We're set up in terms of the governance model that we need to follow. So let's make sense of this and let's get practical with it. Let's look at everything that's in place. Let's go through these specific domains and areas, hardening of systems. Let's talk about vulnerability management of your environment. Let's ensure that we have proper access controls and authorization, data protection, all of the different areas that need to be that we need to align to. And let's start with what you have, what we can secure first. We start with the first 30 days, the next 60 to 90 days, the next 180 days. So going through that list, being able to clearly map out or lay out a roadmap such that we can follow that practically. We have goals, we're set, and we're going. So that's an area that we've recently had success with, and I think the company's in a good place now. So that's one example that I can think of immediately.
Yeah, I think you made me think of some things related to like a virtual CISO from a consulting perspective gets to, if that person comes to help you, well, they're also a consultant as well. So I think there's a lot of levers that we know how as consultants who have to go in and try to orchestrate change within an organization and those things. So, that enlisting a lot of different sides of the business, understanding the voice of the different business units. Those are the things that kind of come natural to us. So it's more than just that security aspect. It's that whole political aspect and other things that we can, again, I would much rather coach a CISO that's in place, be able to kind of empower them to do good and just back off. I mean, we literally, if we're doing our job right, we want to work ourselves out of a job in the vCISO position.
That's right. That's the goal, is to get to a place that where you can actually remove yourself, that you set them up, they're ready to go, they can carry on themselves. And you bring up another point that I think is really important, and this is something we try to stress to the customers we work with. We have a security team that's a pretty strong security team, and so when we talk to virtual CISOs, if you bring an individual in that can come in and act as that point person, that individual, and help align the business and all of that, that's great. Where that sometimes breaks down is if you don't have the support, if that virtual CISO doesn't have the support of a larger team that they can lean on. And so that's really a key to success, because that virtual CISO is going to be in the same place that a lot of CISOs are, if they're just being hired for the position. They don't have all of the expertise in the various domains. So what we do is we augment that with the broader security team that has specialty focus in certain areas. So cloud security, network and infrastructure, governance, risk and compliance, SOC infrastructure, for instance. So those really, if you focus on those areas, you could spend your entire life in one focused area, trying to learn it, to the nth degree. And so having that support to lean on, having a larger team, is really valuable. So we help customers in that way, and we think that's a really good model for other companies to work as well. So,
no, again, you're preaching to the choir here. I absolutely agree. I think we're getting, and just the nature of the industry itself. I mean, a lot of folks are getting into the more of this cloud and CASB. We're talking a lot about DevOps now. We're talking a lot about SOC and getting serious about that and how it integrates with our cloud services. Those things, even if you were killing it 5 years ago, that's stuff that's potentially out of your realm of background these days. And having somebody to come in and give you that level of comfort, again, I think it's more of a confidant. Some of the, people are afraid to ask questions and stuff like that. I always say, just ask the questions, because half the people in the room probably don't know the answers to them either, but everybody's just kind of nodding through it. But ask those questions. And then that gives you, that's one of the things I really think, to your point, that's really great about having a really diverse team that we can kind of go to is, we've got cloud folks, we've got SOC folks, we've got incident response folks, we've got security and assessment compliance folks. We can tap the right guys on the shoulder to be able to pull those guys in. So it is kind of the best of both worlds. You've got an organization needs an on-prem part of the team CISO that it understands the business better than anybody else and understands the politics and how to get things done. But I think augmenting that with a vCISO with a team behind them is the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I agree. And it really takes the load off. It's tough enough to find good individuals within security. It's tough to find those to stay for any significant amount of time in a specific, with a specific company. So I know a lot of businesses are dealing with that. Another area that I think the service is super helpful with is continuity. So if you have, if you're working with a virtual CISO as in the capacity of a consultant who understands the business, you don't need them all the time, right? You lean on them when you need them. You bring them in for specific aspects or projects or initiatives or whatever you're working on. But if you find an organization that you're comfortable with and they can give you the right direction and you have that individual there, so if you have issues with staff being let go, leaving themselves, going on to greener pastures, whatever that is, you at least have some consistency. So it's important to have it at least from that perspective. I think it's super helpful for a lot of businesses. And we've seen that over and over again. We've worked with businesses. We've gotten into a good place. We've helped them even, staff CISOs within their organization in some instances, which is good. We want to do that. We want to get you to a place where you're operating on your own. But then if you feel like you have a need again, if you have turnover, whatever that may be, and you need to lean back on the virtual CISO service, it's there, it's available, and you can pick up, where we left off previously. So.
Yeah, no, to your point, one of my favorite engagements that we had was where there was a new CISO who had come up in the ranks of the organization that was really valuable to that organization, but we helped him align what frameworks and helped him understand kind of the risk management posture of the organization. And that was a really great relationship for both parties, because I think it really allowed him to succeed and it allowed us to give them the springboard to get to where they wanted to be.
That's right. Yeah. And another area I think where it's super helpful is the whole staffing aspect. Sometimes you don't know really, should we be focused on staffing the organization long term with security personnel, or should we be pivoting to a managed service for the organization? So that whole spectrum is, you could spend hours talking about that and going down that road, but that's another key area that we see, companies needing help on. What should we do? Which direction should we go?
Yeah, I not trying to toot our own horns here, but I mean, I think it's just as important to have that CISO kind of capability, but it's also that Rolodex that the vCISO has with the team behind him, and the capabilities organizationally that stands behind them is really important as well. So that guidance on managed services, that guidance on platforms, that guidance that they can bring to bear behind them is also just as important of a selling point from that vCISO perspective. Well, cool. I think it's been a good conversation. Any last minute thoughts related to kind of how would somebody kind of get ready or kind of evaluate whether they need a vCISO?
So I guess really the where I would start is, how comfortable do you feel about the organization's ability to handle an incident? So if you had an incident today, if you knew that you were going to be in the news, you knew that something was going to roll up on the organization, and tomorrow there's going to be lights on us, visibility, camera crews, whatever that is. How comfortable do you feel with that right now? Do you feel like your organization is able to handle that from a messaging standpoint, from a customer standpoint, from a technical standpoint within the business? Typically, the answer is going to be no. Most companies, if they're honest with themselves, would say no. But really, where are you in that spectrum? How do you, how comfortable do you feel with your team? And can you even answer that question? Do you really have enough information to answer that question? Have you really thought through that? So I think it's companies that probably feel a little unsure. Maybe we don't know what we don't know. We don't know if this happened or that happened. How would we deal with that? How would we handle that? Both strategically, both from a business standpoint and also from a technical standpoint. So that's probably where I would start, is asking those questions. And if you feel like you probably need some support, if you feel like you probably need some help in buttressing that and ramping up your capabilities in specific areas, then that's probably the first place I would start.
Awesome. Well, Evan, it has been a pleasure talking to you about this subject, which we talk about all the time, but it's been fun doing it live as well. And for any of you out there that have more questions related to virtual chief information security officers or any of the stuff that we've talked about, there's a lot of resources available on our website, and feel free to go there. It's at insightcdct.com. And thanks for joining us today. We had a great time, and feel free to reach out to us. Have a good day.
Thank you.